Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Slow Art Friday. My name is Paige Taylor, and I'm the Learning and Engagement Assistant here at the Asheville Art Museum. And I'm happy to be joined today by Doris Potash, the Master Docent. As we participate today, please remember to choose a quiet room and silence alerts from devices. Try not to sit in front of a bright light source. Use headphones and microphones for best sound quality. Use a desktop, laptop, or tablet for the best viewing experience. Make sure your screen name includes your first and last name or your first name and last initial. To ask questions or make comments, you can unmute your microphones, type into the chat box, or raise your hand. We are recording, so if you prefer not to be part of the recording, we welcome you to turn off your video, mute your microphones, and you can unmute yourselves when you want to make a comment or just use the chat box. Each Friday at 12 p.m., docents lead virtual interactive conversations about a few artworks in our collection or special exhibitions. The goal is simple: slow down, discover the joy of looking at art, and talk about the experience with others. For today's program, Doris will lead us on an interactive conversation about 3 artworks in our special exhibition. We'll spend about 15 minutes or so with each artwork. Doris will allow us time to look at each work on our own, slowly, before leading a conversation about each one with questions. As participants, we encourage you to engage in dialogue with Doris, myself, and each other. Doris, what are we going to be talking about today? Oh, and Doris, you can unmute yourself. And everyone else is welcome to as well.
Thank you, Paige, and welcome everyone. I noticed that I lost my internet momentarily while the music was playing, so hopefully that won't happen again. Let's all keep our fingers crossed. These artworks that we'll be looking at today actually were selected from an exhibition that's currently on view at the Asheville Art Museum, and it highlights artwork from our collection that references sports, athletes, and the Olympics. And if you haven't seen it, you absolutely must. It's a fabulous exhibition. And one of the things that I learned in preparing for our discussion today that I didn't know before was that early games of the Olympics between 1912 and 1948, art competitions were featured in the program, and medals were actually awarded in architecture, literature, musical composition, painting, and sculpture. So that's a little, at least for me, unknown fact about the Olympics. So let's start with our first artwork today. Thank you, Paige. So I'll give you a few seconds to look at this. Hopefully you've already had a chance to look at it on your own when you signed up for today's presentation. So what's going on in this artwork? And we're a small group today, so feel free to unmute yourself and just speak up.
Well, there are a number of swimmers, but what's interesting to me is that they're going in different directions.
Yeah, so we have some swimmers. They're not all going in the same direction. What else do you notice?
It doesn't seem like it's an actual event. To me, it's very creative, and it's basically, I think, in pen and ink.
All right, so it looks like it's done in pen and ink. It's actually charcoal, but it's hard to tell from a slide, definitely. But it would be clearer if you saw this in reality at the museum. And it doesn't look like an actual competition. What is it that makes you say that it doesn't look like an actual competition, Ellen?
Well, first of all, there's a woman, and then there are 2 men, and everyone is using a different stroke. The man on the top seems to be doing a backstroke. Well, the woman who is in the center and the man who is on the lower, they both seem to be using the crawl.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So this it doesn't look like a competition because number one, you typically in an Olympic competition they would have separate races for men and women, and also they would probably be doing the same thing. What else do you notice?
Well, hi, I'm just joining late.
Hi,
Sorry.
Sally.
Hi. Along with what Ellen was saying, in a competition, I think it would, the bodies always seem linear and in lanes and kind of elongated, just driving in a forward motion. And here the angles are really interestingly kind of bumping into each other almost.
Yeah, they do look like they're kind of on top of each other, or that they would bump into each other. What else?
The arms look really accentuated. In other words, they're depicting real arms, but just the way the man has all these, like, it looks very muscular, and the way the curves and the bumps, and then with the woman, the way her hand was positioned with the hand coming down with the elbow in the air, that they're accentuating the strength of these swimmers with their arms.
So even though it's not a competition, there are things that the artist did that accentuate strength, and particularly the focus on the arms for you, Laurel.
Yes.
Is there any sense within this artwork of what time might be represented? Like, is this something that might have been done now, or maybe long ago? Anything that you can tell that gives you a sense of time?
It seems rather contemporary, just basically based on the swimwear.
Yeah,
so it could be any time from maybe really the last 50 years even.
Yeah.
But the other thing I've noticed that there's a very strong design element as the way the woman's hip seems to fit into the curve of the man's waist.
Yeah, Paige, I thought that was really interesting too. Can you point there? See how that the way the artist put those two figures together, almost like puzzle pieces. Michael, you had your hand up a minute ago.
Yeah, I just thought it seems like sometime in the past to me. I don't know exactly why I say that, but it just doesn't seem contemporary to me. But it also reminds me a bit of a mosh pit. It's like they look like they're all gonna bounce off each other or collide with each other. I don't see any way out of that. And the other thing is the feet and the hands seem very accentuated. Her feet and the hand of the guy on the bottom look gigantic compared to the other parts, the other limbs.
Yeah,
I wouldn't. This seems like a contact
and his
sport.
hand, yeah, out of proportion to the rest of the figures and even her figure, for sure.
They look like they're underwater to me, but they're not wearing any like caps or eye protective wear or anything like that.
Laura, what is it that gives you the sense that they're under the water?
I agree.
I don't know. It looks like they're holding their breath, maybe. It just looks to me that they're under the water, not above it. I also get the sense that it's not real contemporary either, but it's just a feeling.
Just the sort of style of the artwork maybe gives you that feeling.
Yeah.
I also think it's underwater, but it's because of the horizontal lines that are scattered. It's almost waves. Very light white lines vertically horizontally throughout the piece.
Yeah, that doesn't give you the sense of where the water stops at the top, or it just it's a bit disorienting to me. I think looking at this, thinking about these people being swimmers, and just from the things that have been said before, like they seem like they're just kind of floating over top of one another. And you commented it a little bit. Is there any more that any of you would like to say about how the artist used space in this drawing?
I feel like it's a very relaxing piece of art. I felt myself floating. It doesn't look like they're trying to get anywhere fast. It's particularly the man on the top whose arms are back, and it almost looked to me like, rather than being a pool, it was more like a larger water feature, like under the ocean or something, and we're just in there kind of floating around. I know it's unrealistic that they're not breathing and they're underwater, but you know, for a short period of time, it just seemed to me, I felt buoyant myself looking at it.
Yeah, so Angie was talking about this mood, the mood of this art for her kind of creates this mood of being relaxed. Any other thoughts about what mood this creates for you?
I see it more with tension or stress, especially the facial of the woman there. I mean, she doesn't look to be just laying back in a pool with a cocktail and a floaty device, you know. She really kind of looks intense there.
Anything in particular about her, about what the artist did with that expression that gives you that feeling?
Just the eye and the mouth, and even the way the hand comes over, you know, it doesn't look like, and her feet aren't just like this, they're kind of tightened up, and so it doesn't look like someone having a relaxing day out in the pool there.
So she's putting more effort into it than perhaps the other two figures are. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
There seems to be some depth of field, as I keep looking at it, that the man on top is actually in back of the woman, and that the man on the bottom may even be to the forefront of the woman, and he is just sort of coming into the picture.
Yeah, so there's a little distance too between the man at the bottom and the little more space between them than the top two figures seem to be overlapping. Yeah, yeah.
The two men you can't see their face. It's hard to tell what their experience is. They do, I agree with Angie, it seems like the two men are having a great time floating, and the woman looks like more, it's a struggle, and her mouth is open, so it's hard to see her as being underwater. It's like she's breathing through her mouth, but the two guys look very relaxed.
And maybe for those of you who are swimmers, even if you're not competitive swimmers, I remember taking swimming lessons, and the way that we were taught was when your arm was up and you turned your head to get a breath out of the water. And so your body may be turning a bit as you do that. That could be maybe what that position is representing. I don't know, are any of you swimmers or been competitive swimmers before? Yeah.
Not competitive, but I have swum.
Mm-hmm. Any thoughts about Ellen, then about what she might be doing in that position?
It looks like she is breathing, and her head maybe slightly turned, which is, it is true. You do turn your head, to the side, either right or left, depending upon your stroke, to breathe.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for confirming that, because I wasn't sure. I just, remember as a kid, having swimming lessons, but I haven't swum like that as an adult. What did the artist do to demonstrate strength, skill, and grace of these particular swimmers? Anything that kind of rings for you?
Well, one of the things I'm noticing, and I'm not sure that it accomplishes what you're speaking of, but I'm curious about, is that the black lines that outline the bodies, especially where they are next to the other bodies, which, don't look natural. They look drawn, and they emphasize something there. And I don't know if it's strength, but I'm curious about that.
So there's that emphasis of the outline, that strong black outline that the artist used in drawing these figures that might evoke strength for you, perhaps. Kind of gives it that strong line. The fact that this was a charcoal drawing, did that choice of medium do anything for you to kind of, does it seem like it complements swimming, would, if you were going to demonstrate or illustrate swimmers, would you have chosen a different medium than charcoal drawing?
It seems that it's almost random or almost candid, that it's almost could be actually a sketch for a more permanent piece of art, to maybe into a watercolor or an acrylic.
Yeah, could very well have been just a preliminary sketch for a painting that the artist may have chosen to do. What do you think the swimmers are feeling at this moment? We talked about how you were feeling, but how do you think the swimmers in this drawing are feeling?
I think they have energy. I think they feel energetic.
Energetic? Anybody else? I know you talked a little bit about the woman seeming to be putting more effort into this, and the men kind of floating along. So maybe the men are feeling a little more relaxed than the woman at that point. And we could probably have a whole different discussion of what that might mean in terms of women and men in the world, and maybe women struggling a little harder than men. I don't know. We can go ahead and put the information up about this artwork page, if you have it. The title is Dream Swimmers, and it's Dream Swimmers 2. I couldn't find any examples of Dream Swimmers 1. The artist is Gerald Vanderwaal, and he was born in 1932 in Detroit. He always wanted to be an artist, even since he was a child. And he attended the Art Institute of Chicago, but he only attended the Art Institute of Chicago originally for 3 months. And he says that some people thought he, because he didn't have a lot of self-discipline because he was so young, some people thought that he just dropped out, but he said he actually might have been thrown out, so he was a little vague about that. But in 1952, he received his acceptance letter to Black Mountain College, but that was unfortunately on the same day he received his draft notice. So he wasn't able to attend Black Mountain College until 1954. And for those of you who are familiar with Black Mountain College, it was in around that time, shortly after that time in the 1950s, that unfortunately Black Mountain College ran out of money and had to close. And so while he was at Black Mountain College, though, he studied with an artist that is also represented in our collection, Joseph Fiore. So if those of you who may have seen some of Fiore's landscapes may recognize that name. When Black Mountain College closed, Vanderwaal returned to Chicago and practiced his art there. While he was at Black Mountain College, he was at Black Mountain College at the time that the college had expanded to include writers as well as fine artists. And I am not the literary person, but there may be a few of you who are, that would recognize the poet Charles Olson. And he was a poet at Black Mountain College and was a friend of Vanderwaal's while they were both there. And Charles Olson created wrote a poem that was called Variations for Gerald Vanderwaal. So I think that was kind of an interesting note on that author. When I was looking at some of his artwork on some gallery websites, this seemed to be, even though this sort of has that abstract look to it, and it was done in 1999, so it really is kind of hard to place it, because 1999 looked more contemporary, was more contemporary to me than this looked as well. But most of his artwork was really abstract, like just like shapes and not really no figures that I could see in it, at least in what's being represented that I was able to find. So this seemed a bit unusual for his artwork. So that is Dream Swimmers. And now we'll go on to our next one. I'll take a couple seconds to look at this again. So what's the first thing that you noticed in this portrait? What's the first thing the artist brought to your eye here?
I think it was the eyes. I mean, I'm just drawn in right away to the eyes.
And what is it that the artist did? Anything that you would particularly point out that brought your eye to those eyes?
Maybe the white underneath it and the dark above the white under there, like and then the dark above the eye. I guess the contrast of the colors, the shade. The shades of the black, the gray. Yeah, thanks. Anyone else see something different at first?
I think the man is an African American. I don't know why. There's just something about him, and the face is very intense. And for some reason, I have to admit, I did not really read the background on it. I don't know why. I think somehow it reminds me of a boxer.
Okay, so it looks like a boxer, and it looks from the features looks like it might be African American. Anyone else have any thoughts about that?
He looks very much African American to me, and he looks the immediate thing. I understand the eyes, and I agree that white under the iris there's very interesting, but power is what I get. He looks like a boxer. He looks, and his neck looks about as thick as his head. That's someone who's really worked at developing his body. You don't see that except in boxers, maybe professional football players, real powerful athletes.
So this exudes a sense of power for you, and particularly the thickness of the neck, which you would associate with boxers. Anything else that might represent boxing here that you can see? It's kind of hard. It's very dark. It's hard to see.
It feels like his hands are up. I think that the bottom, that looks like his hands are coming up under his chin, and the mouth, also has that white highlight around it. So he looks very intent and determined, like doesn't necessarily seem happy. I'm the champ or whatever, but I'm going to go and I'm going to, take this opponent on. That's the kind of feeling that it gives me.
It's hard to tell, but it almost could be that he has a split lip, or that there's blood going down from the nose to the lip there, which would indicate an active, ongoing fight,
So again, the artist's use of light and dark in this artwork is evoking a lot of things for you all. It's bringing your eye in, the darkness around the between the nose and down into the lip could represent blood for some of you. The position of the hand under the chin, not looking very happy, I heard. Looking intent. Not necessarily happy.
Doris froze.
What else about his facial expression? Anything else anyone would like to add about that?
To me, I also thought of a boxer, and I thought there's a kind of dazed, a dazed intensity. It looks kind of like he's in service to some purpose. That's what I'm seeing.
I think we lost Doris.
Doris is probably reconnecting, but we can continue for a few minutes on this artwork. So Sally is talking about sort of the gaze or the expression on the person's face Anyone else have a comment about that, the way that his facial expression looks?
He almost looks defeated and sad at the same time, looking powerful and determined.
I think he is looking determined. And also it looks like you could see the top of his shirt, and that would be something that a boxer would wear, the undershirt style. Yeah.
Where is that, Ellen? Like down here?
Here, no, up to here. This, the t-shirts, the strap, the t-shirt
Oh,
strap.
like this, a strap of a t-shirt?
The tank shop, yeah, the tank, yeah,
Okay.
right there, yeah.
Sorry, guys.
No
Lost my
problem.
internet for a minute.
Welcome back.
We were just talking about
That's a
the,
horrible feeling when you're leading the discussion. It's bad enough when you're just a participant. Okay, so
we were just talking about the expression and
Yes.
Ellen. Mhm.
Oh,
And Ellen was mentioning, it looked like, what were you saying, Ellen? Like the strap of a shirt?
that the the tank top, which is what, you know, a boxer would wear, the strap there. I'm sticking my finger on the screen. I know you can't see, but and I think he looks determined, but he doesn't look defeated. He looks like he wants to beat the other person.
yeah, so maybe this looks like before the fight and not after the fight, perhaps for you?
No, I think it's within.
Or during.
During the fight.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, like maybe when they go back into their corners during the, you know, I don't know what you call it, the break or whatever. Yeah, yeah,
Okay, between the rounds.
yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah.
I get
He
a
doesn't look angry. He doesn't have that kind of fight. So it's a different kind of fight.
Yeah, not a fierce anger, but just a more like
Just
a
a fear,
boxer
a fearlessness and
determination.
determination.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm just going to give you a little bit of information. We're not ready to change the slide yet, but I want to give you a little bit of information, then we'll see if this enhances the conversation. The subject is actually thought to be the boxer Joe Louis, who was world heavyweight champion from 37 to 49. And as you pointed out, a couple of you, that he is an African-American boxer. And during that period, professional boxing was among the few integrated sports in this country. And Joe Louis was a hero, particularly to African Americans. And on June 19th, 1936, if you recall your history, that was the Berlin Olympics. And Joe Louis had been previously undefeated, but he was knocked out by Germany's Max Schmeling. And the German Minister of Propaganda, Joseph Goebbels, had proclaimed Schmeling's victory a triumph for Germany and Hitlerism. There was a Nazi weekly journal that commented that Schmeling's victory was not only sport, it was a question of prestige for our race, meaning the Aryan race. In 1938, there was a rematch, and Louis actually defeated Schmeling in one round. So just thinking about that, any additional thoughts about the subject and how the subject of this portrait has been portrayed? You already talked about a little bit about what he might be thinking. This artwork was done in around 1938. It was done in the mid 1930s. So around the time or shortly before the time of that rematch.
I got the feeling that he has a bit of age on him, you know, that he's not the new kid just coming on the block, because you can see there's some whitish patches in his hair at the top, and it looks like his ear has been, you know, I wouldn't say cauliflower ear, but it looks like it's been pounded on somewhat, the ear on the left side of the frame. So I saw almost, you know, a weariness, a determination. I'm going to do this, but I'm tired. I've done it before.
Yeah, yeah. So it's sort of someone coming toward perhaps the end of their career instead of the beginning of their career.
I think that there was a determination that he was going to beat Schmeling because of the fact that he was put down and denigrated because he was African American, and he was determined to show his equality as a human being and his super strength.
Yeah, yeah. So going back to that feeling of determination and maybe even more rationale about why you get that sense of determination. What about the sort of the tone and the background, the use of the background and the use of space in this art? How does it enhance what you're saying about the subject of the portrait, or does it not? Would you have made a different choice if you were going to commission this particular artwork?
I think it shows the strength of his face, and everything is centered on his face.
So that the darkness pulls out the facial
Yes.
expression. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
I think it's beautiful. I just want to add about the expression that I see a lot of the determination in his jaw, but in his eyes, what I see is more like a burden. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So what some had interpreted as weariness, that might actually not be inconsistent with that, just that burden. Sally, say a little more about what you think that burden might be. I don't want to make assumptions about what you were going to say.
Well, I think when you added the information about the fight and what it represented, the racial tone, I think maybe the burden of fighting for his race, fighting for the esteem that had been taken away.
Yeah, yeah.
Repeatedly.
Or the importance of this future fight to kind of win back
Right.
his respect.
That's where I see the determination that he is going to prove that he is still the champion.
Anyone else? There's some people we haven't heard from yet, especially on this particular artwork.
I lost my internet connection there for a minute, but I'm
Yeah.
back.
Welcome back.
So I don't know if anybody said this, and I may be reading something into it, but his eyes look sad to me. I could, now this is all projection or me just making up a story, but I wonder, does he want to really destroy his opponent? Because I think he could. And so this is, I don't know, that feels like reading a lot into it, but his eyes do look sad. And yet he looks very powerful and not concerned about his dominance.
Yeah.
So
So
I see this
the
being
body is powerful, but the
Yes.
eyes are kind of sad.
there feels like a sadness to it. Yes.
Where's his gaze? Where is
It's
he looking?
down. It's looking down, isn't it?
Looking down.
Yeah.
I think it's almost looking at his opponent. It could even be that you said he knocked him out in the first round, and it could be as he was knocking him out.
Yeah. Yeah. In that matchup. Yeah. Yeah. Rematch. Yeah. Could be.
I didn't hear that part about knocking him out in the first round, but that's what this looks like. This looks like he's very dominant and maybe concerned about his opponent, or maybe, something like that. Something in his eyes look, concerned, sad.
Concerned or sad. Yeah. Yeah. What else? Anything else you'd like to talk about with this particular artwork before we move on? It's a beautiful portrait, I think.
I just noticed that the position of the hand and the face reminds me of the statue, The Thinker.
Ah, yeah, yeah. Hadn't thought about that, but yes, it's the same gesture, isn't it? Yeah. Interesting. Also, the fact that, at least from what I can see on my screen, the position of the hand almost reminds me of a boxing glove. It's not really, the fingers and everything don't seem, at least from what I can see, to be really well defined. And at first I thought, well, it might even be a glove, or the way they wrap their hands before they put their glove on. But yeah, the way that the chin is resting on the hand, this is like the thinker. And even I guess even the way the eyes are kind of looking into space, like very thoughtfully. Doesn't seem to be really focused on something. It is a lot like the thinker too. Great observation, thank you. We can put the information about the slide up now, about the artwork up now. Sorry, the slide, thank you. The title is The Champ, and the artist is Dox Thrash. And this was created in around 1938. They're not exactly sure when this was done. It's not very large. It's 3.5 by 3 1/8 inches. So it's small.
The one we just saw was really large. So the swimmer was larger than I.
The swimmer was large. Yeah.
Smaller.
This is smaller. Yeah. And again, it's kind of hard to get that feeling on the screen. And that's one of the things that I think is a challenge when you're looking at slides on your computer screen, that you really don't get the sense. And that's why I think it's important for us to actually put what the dimensions of the artwork on, because it kind of changes your impression of it. And when you look at it really in the museum, sometimes it's kind of surprising. It was for me once the museum reopened, to see some of these artworks that I hadn't seen before, except on slides, and say, whoa, this is really big, or whoa, this is really, really small. Dox Thrash was born in Griffin, Georgia in 1893. He left Georgia at the age of 15 in search of work up north. And again, he moved to Chicago. That must be a busy place. And worked during the day as an elevator operator to fund his studies at the Art Institute of Chicago. His studies were interrupted by World War I. He served for a year as a member of the famous all-Black 92nd Division. You might have heard them called the Buffalo Soldiers, and he served in France. He suffered a gas attack and shell shock, but wasn't permanently injured. And while recuperating, I thought was kind of interesting, he became a member of a vaudeville act that performed at military hospitals. And he continued to tour the vaudeville circuit in America before returning to the Art Institute full-time to study art. And from 36 to 39, at the height of the Depression, he was part of the WPA program, the Works Progress program, that sponsored the arts. And years before the Civil Rights Movement forced white Americans to see disparities between white and Black America, Dox Thrash had brought to the nation an inside look at African American life. And he was praised by prominent African American intellectuals such as Alan Locke and W.E.B. Du Bois. So he was a very prominent artist during that period. So now we can go on to the next one. I love all of these. I was going to say I love this one, but I love the other two as well. Mm-hmm. Take a few seconds and look at this one again. Refresh your memory. So what's going on here? What's happening?
Well,
the gymnast.
A gymnast. And I'm struck by the, always, even in the Olympics, of the gymnasts, by the curvature and the flexibility of their bodies. I mean, even her foot, the way the toes are pointed and the heel is down, and the space in her legs and her arms and shoulders, it's just truly amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So this photograph for you truly accentuates what's required in this sport, particularly the curves of the body in this particular photograph.
Who is it of?
Ellen, say that again. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
I'm asking a question. Can you tell us who this is a photograph of? or is that for later?
Well, in other circumstances, it would be for later, but what I can tell you now is we don't know who this is.
Oh,
We think it was someone who was in the Olympic trials at the point in time that this photograph was taken back in the 80s in LA. But there was no identification. Usually this photographer identifies who the athlete is. This one is just anonymous, so I don't know. So it's probably nobody like super famous.
But it's red, white, and blue. So
blue, yeah.
USA, you know.
Mhm.
But
Yeah,
look at the,
especially if it was Los Angeles.
but look at the strength of her legs. I mean, the tendons and the muscles, especially in the leg with the knee, not the one with the toe pointed up, but the other one. I mean, you could just see, yeah, the strength there.
Mhm.
Well, I had an emotional response to this. It's beautiful. And you can tell, you know, her expertise and her dedication to this pose. Do you notice you don't really see her face? The fact that she's not identified, I think, really bears out a lot of what there is to this sport. It's considered a team sport, but really these women are competing, you know, against each other within the team to see who's going to get the most points for the, you know, for the whatever event that they're competing in. And, you know, and it is beautiful to the eye and to the audience, but, you know, what it takes from the person, you know, and perhaps I'm having this reaction because of what just happened at the Olympics with, you know, Simone Biles taking herself out of the competition. We kind of see them as athletes and promoting this beauty, but kind of forget that there's a person in there, and usually it's a very young person. So that's how it made me feel.
Especially at that time, the gymnasts were not known as individuals. I think that's happened really in the last 20 years when our gymnastics team has become, you know, such a winning group of gymnasts, where, you know, they've also developed their own personalities. I saw the gymnast in Beijing, and that's what this reminded me of. So there was a very personal memory here. But
were you actually there, Ellen?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful! Wow.
I was there in 2008, and we saw the finals of the individuals. And it's absolutely amazing to see. And that's what this reminded me of. And I love the fact of the black background. I mean, that's where the artistry is coming in. And it's just basically her skin and the red, white, and blue leotard.
Yeah, so we've heard a lot from the past couple of comments. First, that identifies it as an American athlete because of the uniform or the leotard that she's wearing with the red, white, and blue that you would associate with the US team. The other comment was the anonymity is actually accentuated by the fact that you can't see her face. So you couldn't even maybe recognize her unless you were really, really familiar with these athletes, and because her features are hidden by her arm. And then talking about the strength, but what it takes, you mentioned, from these athletes to perform in this way. And then how the dark background accentuates this. How would your reaction be different if the photographer had actually showed the crowd behind her in the stands? What would that do for the overall composition of this photograph?
I think it would be distracting, and to me, it would also be something that's something you usually see.
Yeah,
this shows a certain artistry.
So it makes it more artistic to have the black background, and as well there would be more distraction from this figure if you had that busy background of a crowd.
Yeah, as a photographer, you would blur the background for sure. because you want this foreground to stand out. But, composing it, on Adobe Photoshop or something, you can get rid of the background altogether like this one has done, but that background would have to be very blurred because you want this figure so dramatic.
Yeah.
It just going to jump out.
Yeah, so clearly this was manipulated to provide that the black background there. And as you all said, to really highlight the figure and to provide less distraction so that you really can see this figure.
Or there's the absence of the balance beam or a mat. I mean, you expect to see some sort of an apparatus associated with this, whether it be, they have those rings, the horse, the mat, different, I don't know all the technical terms, but basically the absence of that just focuses you in on the athlete there.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, whether you could tell what particularly she was performing on.
It feels like a floor exercise to me.
That's what I was going to say. That's probably a floor exercise. Or the other, well,
Could be balanced.
the other possibility is that she's on some kind of beam, because at least on my screen, I'm not seeing what her foot is on.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get the sense her foot is on something, but I can't see it either. It's just it's cut off really at that point, even
On the
in
bottom.
the photograph.
I wonder if it was done deliberately to make the viewer think, what is she doing? What kind of apparatus is she on?
Yeah.
Or if she's on the floor.
And again, it probably emphasizes then the curvature of her body and things like that, because that's what you're kind of looking at, as opposed to anything in the background, maybe. Yeah.
To me, this represents a kind of ideal to strive towards, and actually makes me feel like going out in exercise.
To see if you can do this, huh?
and it also makes me feel old and sluggish a little bit and a bit dumpy. But it's like there's just an upwelling of admiration, I guess, and respect. But it's just it's a human ideal, I guess, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Something to strive for, but maybe in my dreams. But yeah.
So you would give this athlete a 10 score on this
I would give her a 10
move
before
here.
she even got on the floor. I mean, yeah.
I'm really curious as to know who she was.
Yeah.
I
It's
would
kind of
say-
sad that we're all admiring her and her strength and her form, and we don't even know who she is. Sally, I'm sorry I interrupted you. You were going to say
No,
something.
I would say even what strikes me even more than the human story is this kind of the amazing animal way her body can move and stretch. And actually, when I first looked at the photograph, I thought of a bird, because there's this sense of almost flight.
Yeah. What in particular, Sally, do you think did the artist do for you that gave you that sense of flying? Because I agree, that's kind of what I thought of at first too.
Well, that white stripe that goes all the way down her arm and makes that arc, and kind of gives me a sense of a wing or something. And her legs seem to be kind of in flight as well. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah. Do you think this image was candid, or do you think it was staged and, other than the background, manipulated in some way?
I think it had to have been candid. And then the background, that's my thought, because I don't think you could get someone, to stage it, to do that so well staged. It had to be candid, in my opinion.
Particularly to do it over and over again until we got the shot right.
Yeah.
I get this.
I don't know. So I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts about that. The only thing I know is that the background, the photo itself was manipulated in some way, but when it was taken, I didn't see any indication that this was staged at all.
I would get the sense that multiple shots were taken. Again, one of those fast shutter speeds, kind of those click, 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 click. And then this one was chosen because this captured what the artist wanted to convey. And I'm sure that she probably did the routine multiple times and there were multiple shots. So,
yeah. Perhaps, yeah. So definitely needing, and it's wonderful that we can do that with digital cameras. It's kind of hard to do that with film, but this is something that we can do with digital cameras now, where you just keep taking shots and then you pick the one you like the best, and then maybe you need to play with it a little bit to get an effect like this. But yeah. And I think this was mentioned a little bit before when someone had mentioned Simone Biles, but female gymnasts have been reported to suffer from stunted growth, eating disorders, broken bones, serious sprains, as well as psychological problems. Would you encourage your daughter to participate in this sport? If you had
Only if they really, 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 really wanted to.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
Ellen, if her daughter if this was a dream of her daughter, she wouldn't stand in her way, but it sounds like you wouldn't talk her into it.
And I would be especially with everything that's come up, I would be very, very cautious as to who would be training her.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, a lot of sexual harassment and that has been reported again in this sport. Someone I was reading also where they were talking about I don't know what they call them, costumes or uniforms or the clothing that the gymnasts wear. And looking at this photograph was taken in 1983. And some of the gymnasts now are wearing, saying that they want to wear different types of clothing because the clothing has been so sexualized. I don't know, what do you think about this the way this photograph was shot and the uniform that she's wearing? Y'all didn't mention that before at all. So you were really focusing on her as an athlete and her strength and her grace. Do you see anything that's sexualized in this particular photograph? Particularly, women may be more sensitive to that than the men would be.
The crotch and the high cut over the thighs.
Yeah. And particularly her legs in that V shape kind of draws your eye right in to that triangle there.
I think
certainly.
all of the athletes, I'm sorry, Angela, that have a big sense of sacrifice, whether they're the runners or the swimmers, because they have to train for so long and so many hours. And some of them say 10, 12 hours a day, multiple times a week. They eat, drink, sleep their entire sport. And so they sacrifice, whether it's other passions or relationships or what have you. So it's a lot that they have to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is.
And it starts very young.
Yep, they start pick them out as children, apparently, that have the right build and the right determination to do it.
Yep. My 5-year-old son was identified and encouraged to go into an Olympic training program, but the demands on him at 5 struck me and my wife as just utterly absurd. So
wow,
it didn't happen. But
yeah,
that very young, 3, 4, 5 is when they start.
Yep.
Yeah, you were talking about the the outfit. Again, it accentuates the beauty of her body, the strength of her body, but again, nothing about the spirit, nothing about her. She's got these beautiful legs and this beautiful form, but she doesn't have a face.
Yeah, so we can't see anything about her personality, can't read her mood probably, unless we could anticipate or imagine what it might be like while she's performing, but there's nothing really in her face that gives us any idea, I don't think, about how she might be feeling. Can we have the information now page about this this photograph? Walter Yost is widely viewed as one of the greatest sports photographers of our time, and he's been called the poet laureate of sports, which I think is, I think this particular photograph really reflects that. He was a Sports Illustrated photographer, among other things, but he worked for Sports Illustrated for 58 years and included more than 300 covers. And he also was one of the creators of the legendary swimsuit issues of Sports Illustrated. He has photographed many famous athletes, including Muhammad Ali and Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Tiger Woods. He's done portraits as well as action photographs, such as this one. And there is a whole gallery currently at the Asheville Art Museum devoted to his sports photographs, and they're amazing, just beautiful as works of art, as well as giving you an idea of what it's like to be an athlete. So I really, really strongly encourage you to come and see that exhibition. As I mentioned before, Yost didn't identify who this athlete was, but she's thought to be a part of a group of athletes who were training for the '84 Los Angeles Olympics. And gymnasts have been part of the Olympic Games since 1896. So it's been a long time. And so I thank you so much for your participation today. I really loved these particular artworks, and I'm glad it seemed like you found them interesting as well. So Paige, how about what's happening next time?
Well, thank you so much, Doris, and thank you for this wonderful selection of artworks, and thank you all for participating and making this a wonderful discussion today. Next week on Friday, August 13th, our docents Kay Dunn and Ruth Sedgwick Bryant will lead us in a conversation with the theme of how I spent my summer vacation. So we hope that you will all join us again next week. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you then.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.